Father Patella is the professor of New Testament, and he teaches in the undergrad and in the Graduate School of Theology Seminary at St. John's University. He is the seminary director at St. John's Abbey University and the director of the Graduate School's Holy Man Studies program. He has published on Luke, Mark, John, Angels and Demons, and has written for Bible Today. His most recent book, Word and Image, the hermeneutics of the St. John's Bible, in that book is the fruit of his labors from chairing the Committee on Illumination and Text for the St. John's Bible. Please join me in welcoming Father Mike Patella.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I guess, like as Rob was saying, we're gonna just go through here, and I just want to talk about the leitmotifs in the St. John's Bible. Now, let me explain that. The way it's going to work, I'll give you a very brief. Okay, hang on. Okay, the way it's going to work, let me just give you a brief introduction, and then I'll go through the images themselves, and that probably is where most of the work will be done, because that's where, that's what we're talking about. But I think it needs some background on what about the whole idea of leitmotifs. For opera lovers, the term leitmotif conjures up musical scores of Wagner's Great Ring Cycle. He's the one who used the term the most. A trumpet flourish here or a glissando of strings there will always let. Excuse me. Okay, we'll try this. Okay. Strings here, will always let the audience know who's going to step on stage, okay? And more importantly, these musical patterns help us draw the narrative line together by helping to set up all the pieces of the action into a composite picture. That's what it does musically, okay? Now, this leitmotif technique is not limited to Wagnerian opera. Though Richard Wagner may have developed it into a high form, Steven Spielberg has done exactly the same thing in his whole Star Wars saga. For example, with a few chords, we know when Darth Vader is going to be around, okay? And likewise, moving the action from outer space into the deep blue sea, you don't have to be born before 1954 to know that the movie Jaws, when you hear that theme, da-ump, 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 something bad's going to happen. It's become part of the popular culture. So, with these examples, all involve sound, okay, as melodies. They are a distinctive part of a popular musical score. But when it comes to images, in the St. John's Bible, when it comes to images, the same concept is applied. I must say, however, that unlike the Wagnerian opera, other composers who make a conscious effort to use the leitmotif technique, for both the Committee on Illumination and Text and Donald Jackson, okay, its visual application was not part of the original plan, rather it grew organically. Now, the Committee on Illumination and Text, that was the body of scholars back at St. John's, New Testament scholar, Old Testament scholar, art historian, medieval art historians, artists in their own right, patristic scholars, systematicians, all together formed a body that we were the ones who selected the images to be illuminated, as well as provided the background on why they were important and some of the connections and some of the theology that went behind them, and then sent all that to the Donald Jackson in Wales and his team so they would have food for thought on how to work this whole thing up. So the Committee on Illumination and Text and Donald Jackson, we were working kind of like in tandem, going back and forth, sending things back and forth on how to, on all the images of the Bible. But the idea of the leitmotifs is something that grew organically. We never set out and say, hey, we should have leitmotifs going through this. It didn't work that way. And when I go through the images, I think it'll make that clearer. What I would like to do is, as we go forward, is present some of those images that provide the best known leitmotifs, the visual leitmotifs. And I would like to start out with the two that really gave birth to the idea of the visual leitmotif, Not only will doing so render a comprehensible demonstration of what I mean by leitmotifs growing organically, but it'll also unify the theological understanding of what is meant by word of the Lord. We use that term, the word of the Lord, the word of the Lord. And here lies a critical point. We may sometimes think that the Bible is merely a collective term for all the books in both the Old and the New Testaments. That's the Bible. With such an understanding, however, for example, Genesis, if we see the books as just the Bible as just a series of books in the Old Testament and the New Testament kind of all lined up and somehow bound together, if we see that, we would have to conclude that Genesis really has nothing to do with the book of Revelation, for example, or that the Gospel of John, because it is not a synoptic gospel, has little to do with Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and should be read independently. As the CIT and Donald Jackson worked together, it became very apparent to us that there was a great deal of harmony among the books of the Bible as a whole. In fact, I would say now that the Bible is a well-integrated unity, and that to understand the word of the Lord, we must read it accordingly. That all these books are in conversation with each other all the time, and in ways we don't even know. I'll be discussing this point as we go tomorrow, as we have in tomorrow's lecture. I'll be doing much more this in depth, or at least this point in depth. Now, in the handouts you have, I have the observable leitmotifs, and I have them listed across the top. Now, the best way to read this is I'm going to be going from left to right, across the top. And don't read them vertically, in other words, read them horizontally. But I'm going to say this with a warning, too, because they're all interspersed. It's not like we're going to take the menorah first, and then go to the next, and then the next, and the next. No, this was my attempt to try to put some type of ability to kind of read it and kind of look out for it, because they start blending, and you're going to see stuff that maybe it's not even on the list. Okay, and I'll depend on you to kind of point that out. But just to show you what I mean, and I think it'll become clearer. Okay, so let me start with the first one. Okay, this is and probably you're familiar with it, this is the Matthew page. This actually was the very first page done when we started working on the Bible. It was the very first thing. The Bible, by its volumes, the first volume we did was the New Testament. Actually, the Gospels and Acts. That was the first volume. Second volume was the Pentateuch. Third volume was Psalms. Then we went back into the historical books, and then all the other ones formed. And the last one was the rest of the New Testament. So they were not even done in canonical order. They were not even done in historical order. They were done in actually popular order. Maybe that might be the best way to put it. What most people think of the Bible: New Testament plus Pentateuch, and kind of start working from there, and then Psalms and all that. And a lot of it had to do with getting benefactors on board, because you couldn't try to raise money and say, hey, look what we did with the book of Leviticus. So it had something a little bit more sticking power. Anyway, this was the first page that was done. And now, what went into this? From the CIT's point of view, said, all right, you're starting with Matthew's gospel. Matthew is the most Jewish of the gospels. Matthew's main intent is showing his audience, his Christian community, which was predominantly Jewish, that, hey, it's part of the Jewish tradition. This whole Jesus event, the whole birth, death, and resurrection of Christ is a whole thing for Judaism. It's promised of old, it has connections with the Old Testament, our whole tradition, everything we've done, this is it. And that's what Matthew aims to do. So we send all that information to Donald Jackson, and this is what he developed. Talking about the Jewishness of Jesus, the family starts out with a genealogy, right? So you start with the family tree. It starts out here with Abraham, Hagar on this side, Sarah on this side, a little bit of Hagar written in Arabic, because that's the whole tradition that becomes what then will be the Muslim tradition, with the three Abrahamic faiths, as they're called. Then going right up, and the names written in Hebrew as well as English, going right up to the top, and in the form of a Jewish menorah, which is the symbol of Judaism, even to this day, and the top with Jesus at the very top with all the flames and the fire of the menorah in a highly decorative unit. a couple of things to note. Number one, this whole menorah is there, yes, but you'll notice that if you're into biology and if you kind of pick it out, it's the double helix of the DNA molecule that runs through there. Okay, the kind of those threads and almost look like little like cords that are kind of going up around the stands of the menorah itself. Okay, those are DNA strands. Okay, to show the Jewishness of Jesus, and this is why Matthew has the genealogy at the beginning, is to show the whole family tree, that in fact the family tree. Now, another interesting thing about this is that if you look at medieval manuscripts that have the opening page of Matthew, generally it'll be a picture of like Abraham lying down or sleeping or something like that, and coming from his loins is a big tree with all the names kind of tacked on the branches that go out. Okay, so this is kind of like an updated version of that, reiterating the Jewishness of Jesus, adding some modern elements or contemporary elements, the science to it, and going forth with that. This menorah pattern, look for this. This is going to be one of the leitmotifs. It doesn't start out that way, but watch what happens next. This page is from Genesis, okay, Genesis 15, okay, and well, I have you can see it in your own handout there. You have the whole the list of the things we're doing and the citations and all that. Abraham's covenant, okay, in 15 and 17 there in Genesis. This, when we were going and working again now and sending our information back to Donald Jackson, we said that this whole covenant scene in Genesis, where Abraham, you have the two, where Abraham, falls in the deep sleep, and then also the other one where the Lord God takes him out, has him look at the stars and all that. These two covenant passages, have kept biblical exegetes busy for years. Doctoral dissertations fill the shelves on why are there two and how can you rectify them, the source theories and all that go with it. Okay, all this we send to Donald Jackson saying that, but the bottom line is, Abraham is going to be the father of the faith. That's and through Sarah is where the whole faith begins. Okay, from both Jews and Christians through Sarah and Abraham. Okay, so he's working and said, well, how am I going to show this? Okay, this next thing you know, well, if this is very important for the Jews, why don't I use that menorah pattern that I had already used in Matthew's gospel, and I'll put it in here so you can see, the menorah pattern. And of course, if you remember Matthew's gospel, it starts out with Abraham at the bottom. So right away, and this is the second volume that was done, right away it starts to take shape that, this menorah is somehow can be a great symbol for Judaism. And this was like the second time it was used. Once that was done, I think we were well on the way of saying, we're going to have a lot of stuff coming up here that one of the great ways we can show the interconnectedness visually is by something like this menorah. That we'll use that menorah for showing the Jewishness of the Jewishness, anything that has to emphasize the Jewishness in the Bible, we can always perhaps use the menorah as one of the pieces that we're going to use. Okay, that becomes pretty well established. And there could be other things in here too. In fact, let me just go back for a minute to the Matthew's. If you look at Matthew, at the very, very top, you can see those, the flames and the gold and all that. But if you look at the patterns of those are all what have come to be called in the artistic world arabesques. Okay, these are all based on architecture from the Orient, Mideast, I should say, the Arab world, that in the Islamic tradition, because it's aniconic, they do not use images of living things, that decorative motifs, a lot of geometrical patterns become very predominant in their art, and it becomes very much adopted even in the period of the Middle Ages when explorers and the Crusaders are coming back from the Mideast. They bring these architectural elements and these design elements with them. They start making their way even into the cathedrals of Europe at that time. So we thought that this was something that even introduces here in this menorah pattern. And you'll notice then, when we get over here back to Abraham, if you can see just above where it says I will bless her, and she shall become. I will bless her, and she shall give rise to nations. Right above that, you can see like little stars and things like that. But those are also arranged in arabesque patterns. So another type of a motif that's kind of going through there, connecting the two. And by the way, if you have any questions at any time, I mean, I'll have time for questions and answers at the end too, but if there's something that really bugs you at a certain point in a slide and you want to make sure you remember it, raise your hand and I'll see the best I can do. Okay, now this is perhaps one of the more famous ones, or famous ones that you see a lot throughout the Bible. This is, of course, the first creation story within Genesis. And, you have the 6 days of creation plus the seventh day of rest. So, the darkness, tohu wabohu over here, then the establishing of the firmament, separating the waters, the two great lights, the fishes of the sea, the birds of the air, humankind's creation, and of course the day of rest. Okay, in these 7 different bands. Things you notice in the formless void, in the dark, in the chaos. A lot of these, it looks like, well, kind of splashes of color, I guess you can call it. But also look carefully, because those will also become part of the butterfly pattern. They'll be used in other parts of the Bible. And since I just mentioned it, what is the purpose of a butterfly? Now, this is a really interesting one on how a leitmotif might begin. It starts out in a very mundane, very, very mundane way, okay? Because one of the things that we had, the CIT had, actually even before the CIT, the project plan, was that we wanted to make sure that whatever the Bible did, it would also have local associations. So things like from Minnesota, and even things from St. John's. We wanted historians, art historians in the 500, 600 years from now to open up and say, oh yes, they say this is what the Abbey Church looked like, or something like that, or this was some piece from architecture, or this is particular to Minnesota. Well, the monarch butterfly is something that Minnesotans like to claim because it's on the flight path when they make their winter, what would you call it? Their migration back down to Mexico usually starts in late August, early September, and it's very possible to see. I mean, the trees are just covered with monarch butterflies that almost take the place of the leaves themselves. They have these, the big orange wings and stuff like that. And so we said, monarch butterflies. We want monarch butterflies. That's what we want in our Bible. So, well, all you have to do is say to an artist, the butterflies, and his imagination starts going crazy. So he starts developing butterflies all over the place, and so. Well, tohu wabohu, I'll just play butterfly wings because the way they flap can be kind of look chaotic. I'll just put them there and, squeeze them in, which starts to develop. So that is something that's in its infancy, really, and it'll come up and make its way known through other parts of the Bible and its patterns. I'm not going to say too much more about these 6 days of creation and day of rest because I have more slides, and you're going to see this pattern, and it'll depend on you to pick them out and even make the connections of why they're in there at that particular moment. Okay, this is, there's one right now. Okay, you can see on the leftmost, you can see at least 4 of the days of creation. In fact, let me go back for a minute. You see this raven flying through there, okay, over creation, this raven. Now this is, and you see it again, right over here, facing a dove on the one right next to it, the right column right next to it. What's the story about the raven and the dove and over the waters anyway? This is really a good question. I mean, it's an interesting one too, because in Genesis, it doesn't talk about a bird flying above, any bird, dove, raven, anything flying above anything in the creation narrative. But it does talk about, and God said, okay, the breath of God going out, that ruach that becomes the moment of creation that has a very strong tradition in Judaism, and will come up again when we're talking about in the Gospel of John, okay, this whole creative spirit that goes through there. And Donald Jackson also adopting for the raven, not making it a dove, because the dove would certainly is a sign of the Holy Spirit, but the raven is a bird that's very important, of course, to the prophet Elijah. The raven is the one who feeds Elijah in the desert. But also there's a whole tradition that the raven is one that did something similar for St. Benedict when St. Benedict was in a, well, actually, it's a kind of cool story. St. Benedict, was the founder of monasticism, and he started out by himself, and others joined him, and they wanted him to be a leader, and then so he became their leader, but then they didn't like what he was saying because he was telling people what to do, so they tried to poison him, okay? Perfect way out in the medieval ages, and so supposedly he had a piece of bread, and he was just about to bite into it when a raven came and snatched it away from him, and then deposited it, and they later discovered that the bread had been poisoned. Okay, so the raven, and then also another point, they arrest Benedict, or they throw him in a cave, and a raven comes and gives him food every day and drops him food. So the raven is something that, you can see the parallels of this with Elijah, right? I mean, this is a very big thing to make early saints kind of like the prophets of old. So they kind of, there's this hagiography that goes up with that. Anyway, so that's why the raven gets into the picture too, one of those local associations. So that's a piece that comes in here. But the image itself, this is from the Book of Wisdom, chapter 13 verses 1 through 7. And the wisdom books were one of the last books. It was the second last set we did, I believe. Okay, and so this becomes really late in the game. So let me read what that chapter and verses are, and then we'll put the whole thing together. And you look on your handout there, and it calls it Creation, Covenant, Shekinah, and Kingdom. But let me read the piece. For all people who were ignorant of God were foolish by nature, and they were unable from the good things that are seen to know the one who exists, nor did they recognize the artisan while paying heed to his works. But they supposed that either fire or wind or swift air or the circle of the stars or turbulent water or the luminaries of heaven were the gods that ruled the world. If through delight in the beauty of these things people assume them to be gods, let them know how much better than these is their Lord, for the author of beauty created them. And if people were amazed at their power in working, let them perceive from them how much more powerful is the one who formed them. For from the greatness and beauty of created things comes a corresponding perception of their Creator. Yet these people are little bit to be blamed, for perhaps they'd go astray while seeking God and desiring to find him. For while they live among his works, they keep searching, and they trust in what they see, because the things that are seen are beautiful. This passage from Wisdom is it's a very sacramental, very, very sacramental passage in Wisdom, talking about how the things of this created earth give glory to God. And many people are brought to God. People who have never heard of God are brought to God through the beauty of the earth and through the beauty of creation and through their experience of them. And the writer here in Wisdom is saying, if this is what it takes to get people to the Lord God, so be it. Let them know that when they see the beauty and they're relishing the beauty, just take it one step further. You're very close. And if you can see this, then you can see a bit more. It kind of goes very close to, when in Acts, when Paul goes through the Athens, the Areopagus. Before he gets to the Areopagus, the Forum, not the Forum, what do they call the thing of? Agora, thank you. Different city, okay? He was going through the Agora, and he says to them, fellow Athenians, I was walking through the Agora, and I saw the altar to an unknown God. And he saw this, he said, aha, I have a hook here. I can use this altar to the unknown God and tell him, guess what? I'm here to talk to you about the God that you don't know. Your unknown God is actually Jesus Christ. Now we can start talking. Well, they don't listen to him anyway, but it was a good try. I mean, he gets an A for effort, Paul does. But that's exactly what we're looking at here. Okay? That this whole piece it was one of the reasons we chose it, this whole piece in Wisdom is showing like the universality of God. God is master of the universe and accessible to all through whatever means that people use to get there. Okay? And how the beauty will lead them there. Now, it also is very interesting for the images that are chosen, because the inspiration for the images were these: fire, wind, swift air, and the turbulent water. These are in, in the classics and in the antiquity, the four elements, right? Air, fire, earth, water, okay? And these were then kind of the basis of all creation. This is what the people in their creation, this is what gets them to see God. So we said, let's highlight those and develop them and show them how, as the means for really evangelization. So here, notice this motif, right? We've seen this, we just saw this, okay, the days of creation. That's going to be the earth, okay? And notice you have the luminaries, the separation of the water of the day, the creator of humankind, and of course the raven. Over here you have the dove. Now this is going to be the wind, of course, and the dove, the flight of the dove being the wind, and it's a little aside here too. A lot of times, many of the choices are done just for artistic reasons. If you have a black bird on one side, you don't want to have a black bird on the other side, so you put a white one. This is what artists do. This is why they get the big bucks. So but also it is a dove going across the water, sweeping across the waters, and of course there's echoes of Noah and creation and all that goes with it. Okay, fire. Okay, this itself, the motif from this, we'll get to it when we see the Psalms page, but this is part of the color palette coming from the Psalms, the book of Psalms, and done to look like flames. Okay, and also the Shekinah, which leads. Although in the Exodus volume we do not have a depiction of the Shekinah, the Patella of fire that leads the people by night, the pillar of fire, we refer to it a lot, the glory of God, the Shekinah in Hebrew. So that becomes that part of the glory there. And then of course here is going to be the water, okay? And keep your eye on that because that's another one that's going to pop up, okay? So for the 4 panels there, and each one drawing from different parts of the Bible. Okay, the beginning of Ecclesiastes, the big prologue page. Now here we got a lot, okay? You see the butterfly wings, you see the raven, okay? You can also see right here a little strip of rainbow, okay? These are angel wings from the seraph wings, actually. They made their debut in the book of Isaiah, in Isaiah's temple vision in Isaiah 6. That's where those cherub wings first come in. So they're kind of making their way here. Some arabesques over here. Okay, Ecclesia and the butterfly wings, right? Now notice this, the tohu wabohu. Here they're detached, but they're a little bit more. They have a little bit more form to them. And when you look at this page, this is Ecclesiastes. Now the big thing about Ecclesiastes is it tends to be a very, very ambiguous book. Okay, the opening, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. What use is the worker from his toil? The sun rises, the sun sets. It goes back to where it came from. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you will die. Was that his mood, or was it vanity of vanities, all is vanity? Sun rises, sun sets, goes back to where it came from. What use does the worker have from his toil? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow you will die. Which is his mood? Well, I guess it depends on our mood. If you're the half empty, you're the first one. If you're half glass full, then you're the second. But this is the important thing about Ecclesiastes, is that it's pretty indefinite. One thing we know is this, that true happiness, true fulfillment is only going to come with God. Okay, both can say that. And from the point of departure, then, how you make your life with that, some people are going to be able to make that leap and say, well, life of faith is a life of faith, and I can really make a good go of my life, knowing that here we have no lasting city, very Augustinian view, and off we go. And we can do it jollily and happily. And others who are not prone to jollity and happiness will have another problem with it. But the fact of the matter is we don't exactly know what's motivating Ecclesiastes here, the writer. So you have the butterfly wings, but dark, okay? The rainbow coming through the clouds. Is this a storm moving in, or is it a storm moving out? That whole thing coming in here, and then the raven kind of connecting it to big questions about creation, search for God, all the things that we think of in the raven, all the whole prophetic tradition kind of coming in here too. Just a little kind of something to bring into the text as we're looking at it. Okay, now this is, you notice again, no logical order here, really. I'm going back to the second Genesis creation passage and also this expulsion from the Garden of Eden. So here, even in the second creation story, there's some elements from the first. You can see at the top, for example, the cave paintings of the human forms at the very top. But the more important thing here is the flora and the fauna. It's a very, very rich panel. It's very much like the great like some great Polynesian garden, like Gauguin or something, and some of his paintings where he shows Tahiti and his whole study of the Tahitian culture and all that coming across in here. Okay, and you have the most beautiful coral snake. Okay, lovely little snake, but a very friendly snake at this point. Although it's the deadliest snake on Earth. It's that Australian thing that can jump about 40 feet, without warning and kill you. Okay, but it's beautiful. At least you'll die happy. Over here, but here it comes to the fall, and here notice it as a kind of like a mirror image. Here it's like everything has gone really sour pretty fast. Okay, here it's all vibrant and rich colors. Here they seem to be a little bit faded. The man and the woman can't even look at each other. The snake crawls between them and separates them. So it's exactly what sin is. Sin is separation from God, separation from each other, separation from creation. Just a series of separations, whereas before everything was unified over here. Here it's all separated. But keep an eye on that snake, because he's gonna come around again in various forms all through. Okay, and another thing over here too, down here, these are fabric patterns from some great variations of tapestries and fabrics that people in Donald Jackson's own family were involved in. And he borrowed a lot of their fabrics as kind of inspiration for some of the stuff he was doing. But so some of the tie-ins now, because watch what's going to happen. Come over here now. This is all jumping all the way up to the book of Revelation chapter 12, the great battle with the woman. And here we have our friend snake, but notice the snake now has a dragon's head on it. Well, actually, more of a fantastical version of a dragon, kind of Donald Jackson's imagination working with that dragon. But a lot of other things are going on in here. If you look very carefully, do you see any other patterns that... give you a little time to look at that. The ancient art, back in the creation one? The pen. Oh, the pattern's near her head. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. The pattern's near her head. Okay, very good. I'll get back to that. Good. What are these patterns in her head? First of all, let's start with the woman. Okay, so let's start with the woman. If you're, first of all, it's the same woman. The basic design that actually is Esther in the book of Esther. I don't know if you've gotten to the book of Esther yet, and I don't have an image of it here with me, but it is the book. It's Esther, the great heroine of Egypt. And when you look at Esther, right away, you're going to see Klimt's Judith number 2, that great, from about 100 years ago in Vienna, that the great Judith that he calls her. Anyway, it's one. And Klimt painted he was kind of a cad in many ways, but he painted a beautiful picture of every woman he ever slept with. So he has a huge study of women that I mean, he was a cad, But anyway, this is one of them, okay, that he has, and this becomes then the woman that he uses the woman as because Esther is the great heroine, and this woman is going to become here, and the woman in the Bible, she defeats, the whole battle with the dragon, she becomes a heroine as well. So he uses that face. And as with in the Esther piece, okay, because Esther doubles as the queen of Nebuchadnezzar, but also as the daughter of Israel. So and if you see that Esther piece, she's both dressed in very royally and also very simply. And the two kind of go together. And so the Orientalism that you see in here is from that reference to the court at Nineveh. Okay? So here the woman is kind of showing, kind of making a connection to the strong woman, who's the heroine, and using the Esther image for that. Okay? So there she is, and here you have the snake, or this dragon, about to well, the figures in the thing. There's the one that the snake wants to snatch the child and all that, okay, coming here. But notice this connection, though, back to Genesis, because this is going to be, in Genesis we have the snake, and of course by this time we get to Revelation. What starts out as a snake and Satan becomes the great beast. It becomes the great Satan in the book of Revelation, okay, and the great, archfiend of all things good, trying to thwart God's creation. Here you have this, makes mention of Saint Michael coming down. So here's Michael's sword over here, and the arabesk patterns. Notice some little slight references to the rainbow patterns in here. Rainbow is always going to be the sign of hope, just as it was in Genesis at the flood. Rainbows throughout the St. John's Bible that become signs of hope in the presence of God, or the hope for God, or the breaking in of the kingdom of God's kingdom into this world will always be seen with the rainbow pattern as well. So you get that up there. One interesting piece too about the woman, you notice that she has her hand on her womb actually, because the passage mentions that she's about to give birth to a child. And so Donald Jackson, he was trying to figure out how to do it, how to show all this, because we wanted him to get all this action in there. Went running to his house and went to his wife Mabel and said, okay, when you were pregnant with the children and you felt them in your womb, where would you put your hand? And she went like that. Click, took the snapshot, went running back to the studio and developed it into an artistic piece. Okay, so kind of, that was his last kind of, he got so into it that he was running all over the place, kind of adding things to it like that. Okay, now this one I call a word cascade, although that's something, a term I invented when I was preparing for this talk, okay? Because as I was when I was working through this, I came across another thing that, to me, I thought could work as a leitmotif, and that would be word cascade. And that was particularly the work of another artist who worked on the project, Thomas Ingmeyer, who himself was started out doing a lot of graphic design, okay, and a lot of it was with printing. And so he was given the assignment both for the Ten Commandments, and I'll see the next one, well, you see several of his works. Another one, the one right next to us, the partner image, is going to be the Beatitudes. But his big thing in here, I call this a word cascade, because he's talking about, we talked about how the Ten Commandments, the giving of the Ten Commandments in the desert is two things. Number one, it's establishing the moral universe. We have in Genesis, because it's a creation story. In Exodus, it's a creation story, the Ten Commandments. In Genesis, creation of the physical universe. 6 days of creation, day of rest. Everything has its place, everything has its order. Humankind, animals, fish, birds, sun, moon, everything's all registered. When you come to Exodus and the Ten Commandments, it is two things in one. It's revelation of God's self. God's revealing himself to humankind, God's revelation. God's revelation through law, the creation of the moral universe. That without a moral universe, we're nothing but animals. Without a moral universe, we've got chaos. Without a moral universe, we don't have any government. Without any government, we have anarchy. With anarchy, we have might makes right. So we become animals. So this is the thing we were trying to, one of the things that was in our brief. So we tried to get across the idea of revelation as well as order as well as law. So the prologue to the Ten Commandments, I am the Lord your God, you shall not have strange gods before me, starts out at the very top, okay? And you can see it looks like a very revelatory thing. Notice over here on the right, or on your left actually, the burning bush, okay? Very, stylized burning bush, okay? But a burning bush. some rainbow patterns over here, some images that you'll see in a minute, but also the most predominant thing are the words, right? Okay? And notice, it can be read either going up or going down, or going up or coming down, I should say. If you're starting at the top, where God, revelation exists, where you're close to God, everything has a very fine and definite order, beauty and order. And as you start to pull away from God and start going down the register, it starts to break down, so even the letters start to break down, and you have, disparate pieces, okay, down here. Or you're making your way to God, and it becomes gradually, it's all disparate pieces start coming together and gradually build themselves into order and make themselves one with God at the top. Okay? Now I call that a word cascade, because now look at the next one. This is the Beatitudes. Let me flip back for a sec. Notice this column over here I told you to pay attention to, that one right there. Notice at least the color palette and even some of the shapes and designs make themselves known over here in the Beatitudes. And of course, back to Matthew's gospel, right? Matthew, the Jewish gospel, the whole Beatitudes is set up to be an echo of the Ten Commandments. In Exodus, Moses goes up to the mountain, turns to the people, and speaks on behalf of God. He has the tablets there and speaks on behalf of God. In the Beatitudes, Jesus walks up to the mountain and turns around and speaks without any intermediary. Okay, Jesus speaking. He is God, so he's given the new dispensation, the new commandment, and the Beatitudes that take place on the Sermon of the Mount, when Christ would keep saying, "Do not think I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill." So this whole idea that Matthew's gospel is a continuation of the Ten Commandments, now in beatitudinal form, and also the great beauty that comes with the new order in right relationships and looking out for the poor and feeding the hungry, welcoming the stranger, and all that. Kind of putting it all together in a very composite piece. And that's, again, Thomas Ingmeyer is the artist for that one too. This is Ezekiel's temple. The temple, as you know from your Old Testament studies, is a very prominent piece in Scripture. And Ezekiel, being dealing with the post-exilic period and all the problems that came with the exile and all that, is talking about the new temple that the Lord God will build, and it's very idealized. And this actually is based on medieval texts of showing the new temple, and then with 4 cardinal points: west, east, south, and north. You can see that right there. And the squares and the courtyards and all that. A very idealized and stylized version of that. But notice the predominant pattern in this is really a rainbow pattern. Okay, the palette that's looking up there. But talk about a leitmotif. Look can you see right down here? You see these, what do you call them, the ibis, from Egypt, okay, among the water plants of Egypt, okay. Remember, we saw this in the wisdom piece, except they were facing the other direction. Okay, but the same thing. The fish of the sea down here, and the fish of the sea, you'll see another image of these fish in another piece we'll be working on. Okay, going all across here to show the lush, and the palm trees and all that, to show the lushness and the way he describes it of the great stream going through the temple. And of course, for a desert people, water in a stream is going to be highly important. So working on that. Now this, you'll see this come up again as well. Okay, connection to the Ezekiel temple. Now this is from the Song of Songs, the wisdom books, the garden, the enclosed garden. Okay, the great love poem. This is very, very, has a very, very Arabic design. In fact, the garden itself is modeled on the Islamic garden. But you can see the arabesques down here, some of the flora and fauna over here, connecting it to creation, okay, the initial creation, and the Garden of Eden, which is what a garden in the Bible always symbolizes. It's supposed to be a miniature Eden, as well as in the fact in the monastic tradition, the cloister garden was always considered, in fact, one of the names was called the Paradisum, the paradise. It was supposed to reflect the paradise to come. And some of the fragments of a geometric arabesque, okay, that if these were connected, they would form one of the arabesques, but he took them and broke them apart and used them as decorations there. But if you can see the temple there, kind of the perfection of the geometry and the perfection of geometry in here as well. Okay, here the temple, another temple, okay, this is from the book of Revelation. Actually, it's the city of Jerusalem, built as the temple, okay, that replaces the whole of creation. You can notice some of the, the patterns that kind of go with the Ezekiel piece. Notice in the very upper top, you see this window-like with a divine figure looking out. The last time we will have seen that was in actually Isaiah's temple call in Isaiah 6, where it has a very similar motif where God is in the heaven looking down on the temple area. You can see the tree of life in the lower register there over on the right. But if you look at some of these, these like gold bars, I guess you would call them, does it anything strike? Is there any type of jog your memory at all on anything? It's very stylized, very abstract. Of the what, please? Greek meander. Yep. Do you see a menorah in there? Does it kind of menorah-esque, maybe for a better term? Yeah, I mean the very fact that the right angles it's kind of like a menorah reworked and turned down, and a Greek meandering piece too could be very well a part of it. But it's it's kind of taking that whole thing we started out with in Matthew's gospel, and also in Genesis, and working them into the heavenly Jerusalem, bringing it all together. And of course, you can see the visual allusions to Ezekiel's temple, kind of coming across there. Yeah. One that looks like this, I can't recall one, but the ravens would be there. And there may also be, you may also find, the leaves, the leaves of the trees were like these, were very much similar to the ones that were in the garden over here that we, was songs, that one, right here. The leaves, and the stems of the leaves, right there, that one, we just saw that. Okay? And the rainbow pattern too. Okay, here now Isaiah, okay, this is a suffering servant in Isaiah. Again, okay, very, very dramatic piece, I think. The prison, almost like prison-like bars, and the very it's hard word cascade that you see there. There's a special treatment there. I mean, very dark and heavy. The child looking away, looking up, with a hint of a cross in the gold there. And notice even a rainbow pattern there, a bit of a rainbow pattern that even in the depths of one's suffering, there is still hope. Okay, at the bottom of his feet here, this one will reprise in the Luke's Gospel at the Eucharistic passage, talking about the blood of the Lamb, the blood of the cup. This is my blood that's been poured out for you, okay, with its allusions to the sacrificial lamb. Same piece there. And notice how it is gradually, the dark black part at the top starts to form a bit of a cross. Okay? One of the pieces, this in the Roman Catholic liturgy on Good Friday, the suffering servant is, the various suffering servant passages are read at one form or another in various number of the services. And so we wanted that to come across to the liturgical function. And look at this now. See, this is going to be Luke's Gospel. Okay, the opening page of Luke's Gospel. And several things you can do here. But the one I want to, let me make the connection right away. You notice the bar of light, okay, coming down here, is a bar of light coming down to God reaching into the human history, but it's also human beings, kind of like that passage from Wisdom, looking for God, searching for God too, with their hands going up, searching for God. And the angels flying about, making a crossbeam. Because there's an ancient, goes right back to actually the early patristic writers, that the wood of the crib has become the wood of the cross. that connection between the birth of Christ and the death of Christ is a very prominent one, particularly in early Christian literature. So we wanted to make that emphasis of the wood of the crib becoming the wood of the cross. And of course, back here, you can see that this is a reference, Good Friday, the crucifixion and all that, kind of making it visually here with the birth of Jesus. Other things are in here too. The big ox over here is actually an anorax from a cave painting of Lascaux, based on that, showing that Jesus is the Lord of all history. So it goes back even before pre-recorded history, 50,000 years ago, kind of making that the ox that we always depict Luke's gospel with, right? You know, the Christmas story. If this is, the Blessed Mother over here, okay, Mary right there, that's modeled. We have a big statue, a Burgundian statue at St. John's in our church, in one of our Mary Chapel. That's like the type of, if you look at this, if you had the opportunity to see the statue, that's the type of headdress she's wearing. So it kind of makes itself known there. And plus the different canticles in Luke's gospel, the Benedictus, the Magnificat, the Simeon's canticle, all that kind of make their way around there too, as well as the angel choir. Okay, now here is the book of Psalms. Now this is, again, the menorah, front and center. Notice it looks very, very similar to Matthew's gospel. But the Psalm book the Psalms are the songbook of ancient Israel. It has its human response to God's initiative, and made to look like a set of scrolls that you would take out and read. Each one has its own theme attached to it. The flames at the top. These are the flames. The colors palette is the one that was very similar to the Book of Wisdom. They talked about the Wisdom 13. Okay, symbolizing the element of fire. Okay, coming across in the Psalms there. Another interesting feature is an added feature is that a local association. The monks at St. John's recite the divine office, as it's called, the liturgy, the hours, 3 to 4 times a day. That's always the Psalms. And so to show this connection, this is a book, the songbook of ancient Israel, but also carries over in the Christian tradition. Donald Jackson recorded us chanting our Psalms and made an oscillogram of it. And then took the oscillogram and through an oscillograph, and then came, the thing like that, and then I made a stencil of that, and then started applying it all across every page. So if you turn every page of the Psalm, you see this kind of like filigree, gold filigree, which is part of the oscillogram of monastic chanting of the Psalms. It connects the Psalms together, both Old Testament, New Testament, song, reflection on God, the whole thing. And then, of course, the colors you can see there in the flames and the menorah, so it kind of all sits together. And it can mean a lot of other stuff, too. Yeah? Well, like here? Oh, here. Oh. Left of that. So. I can't tell either, but there could be. How's that for an answer? Yeah. There could be. I don't know how else to. Yeah. Valley of the Dry Bones. Okay. Ezekiel. Okay. The death and destruction. And notice again the rainbow pattern on the top. That even in the midst of all, of course, the Valley of the Dry Bones is about the resuscitation of a whole people. But the interesting thing is, well, the rainbow patterns, some of the arabesques, but also in the bottom register, and some of these come across in other places as well. But the great death and destruction, mostly from the 20th, well, just about all from the 20th century, from the killing fields of Cambodia, the Rwandan genocide, the Holocaust, and even the Balkan War, the Srebrenica and Bosnia coming there over on the far right. Graveyard, auto graveyard there. You can see a car there, environmental destruction. And if you notice, right here, just a hint of a rainbow pattern. okay, looking like an oil slick. Okay, actually it was what it was, because Donald Jackson's father was a bicycle repairman in Britain before and during the war, and he always had to work there on Saturdays or whatever it was, and he said he always remembers, like, of course in England it always rains, and he always remembers like oil blotches in the puddles and how beautiful the colors were. But of course, it's oil, which is not very good for the water system and the water table and all that, making this beautiful pattern. So it's kind of working that even in something death dealing, you can find some hope and something that's good that's going to come out of it. But notice, I'm going to make the comparison here to the Book of Revelation and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. So we kind of compare the two. It's a great deal of similarity between the two. Again, the rainbow pattern, the great destruction, and tying them all together. Some of it is even fantastical in nature. It's like all these, he developed his own line of insects here, his own line of bugs, just for the four horsemen, show the kind of the great transmutation of creation that comes with, who are these horses? What are these? What's causing all this? And this is really, I think, I find a lot of times with students, this becomes a very, very important thing to kind of talk about. Because I think a lot of times we want to see, when we talk about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, and the whole book of Revelation, that, this is what God's going to do to us. This is what we got coming. And boy, do we have it coming, all the stuff we've done and didn't do. This is going to be the day of reckoning. But another way of looking at it is like God doesn't punish that way, and God doesn't have to punish, because we punish ourselves, and we do a pretty good job of it, So even with the horsemen, what you have starting here with the white, the red, the black, and the green, right? I mean, it's even explained in the book of Revelation. Yeah. There are. No, you got it. You got it. You got it. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. I know. And you can unravel it. It's like, you can unravel it and study it. I mean, it's everything. I mean, and like that whole thing. I mean, like, what is the cause of it? I mean, the white horse, empire. The red horse, war. The black horse, death that comes from war. The green horse, the famine that comes from that. What are we looking at right now with ISIS and the refugee crisis? I mean, like, where's all this coming from? It's we can blame everyone we want, but really, if you go back to history, it goes back to about 100 years ago when we redesigned the whole face of the Mideast. I mean, yeah. So it really is a mess, and I think what it is a reminder to us that if we want to fix the problem, we have to do more than just finger point. We have to start, tackling it a bit better. So, yeah, and the oil rigs are there, and then also, by the way, the environmental destruction is that he also uses, see these, like I said, he devised his own line of insects, right? Okay, these are one of them. He thought, they're kind of like the transmutation and the great perversion of nature that we're bringing about. Okay, this is coming from the Acts of the Apostles. It's called "To the Ends of the Earth." Okay, which is a really interesting piece because, well, if you look over here on this point over here, you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth. This is from the very beginning of the Acts of the Apostles at the ascension, the charge he gives to the apostles. Okay, you'll be my witnesses. And sure enough, the Acts of the Apostles goes from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the ends of the earth, with Paul ending up in Rome. But the whole piece in here, you've seen these swirly patterns filled with arabesques. It doesn't come across too clearly on the slide, on the image here. But if you see the real piece with the Heritage Edition, it's very, very clear. The arabesques that come across in here, the Earth, okay, and the galaxies and all that coming very much reminiscent of the moonrise, or the moon and the sun in the first book, in the first creation story in Genesis. The color schemes and all that, and plus another one that I'll be showing you in the next one. But an interesting thing about here, to the ends of the earth, it's kind of related. I think it's related. In fact, it's kind of related. I kind of see it in terms of the evangelization, which we saw in Wisdom 13. Had the 4 panels. Because when we first completed the New Testament, the New Testament was finished in 2005, a little more than 10 years ago. And the thing was that we had slated the Minneapolis Institute of Art to put on a whole exhibition of the St. John's Bible in Minneapolis. And this was a big thing, too, because Minneapolis, the Institute, was really a secular institute. Well, it was. I mean, and they have a lot of benefactors who are not Christian or who are, don't like things Christian, whatever. Anything way you want to put it. Anything you get in modern society, they're at the Minneapolis Institute of Art. And so we were working with them, and they wanted us, how in art museums always hang out to build big banners in front to call attention to this special exhibit they have. And so they wanted us to help design the banner and what image can we use that's not religious, that's not going to offend people, that's not going to turn people away, and kind of going down the line. And so, crucifix was out, cross was out, going through the New Testament, what are we supposed to show? What? I mean, so they said, they came across this on the very last page of Acts, to the ends of the earth. They said, this is innocuous enough. Okay, well, it is like it's the whole Christian vocation. I mean, yeah. No, sure, go ahead, use it, no problem at all. So that was the one they chose. This is what hung out in front of the whole museum, to the ends of the earth. Yeah? So there's a great deal of irony in this life, and that was one of them. But this ends the Acts of the Apostles. But I want to call attention to and this is going to be the last slide I have here. This is Romans 7 and Romans 8. This was done by Thomas Ingmar, the same one I talked about, the 10 Commandments, the Beatitudes, and this. He's done a few other things as well. But Romans 8 is really, it's one of the greatest chapters in the New Testament, certainly the greatest chapters in Romans, and, I think you can really make the case. It's probably one of the greatest pieces of writing in the whole New Testament, Romans 8. And, of course, it has relationship to the Romans. Paul begins his role, his drum roll. He begins it on Romans 7. So artistically, the two are united visually, okay? And we emphasized with Thomas Ingmar, this has got to be something that really, really, particularly in this day and age, when we talk about the fulfillment of creation, God's hand in creation, and the kind of like the resolution of the false dichotomy between faith and science. This has got to be a place where it's going to happen in Romans 8, because he talks about, the earth is in creation, the earth is moaning and groaning even until now for that which is yet to come, and for those who can be God's for us, who can be against us. All this, we want to make sure this came out really, really strong, clear, and particularly all the creative images that Romans 8 references. So you have the panels from the first creation story, okay? And you can see them, right? I don't have to go through all of them again. Then you have the cross, for Paul, very important, the cross up there in the just above number 7, okay? The forgiveness that comes through Christ, okay? Matched down here with this image, and he uses a series of binaries in making this, and what are the binaries? The two-code thing that all our computers are based on. And he got the inspiration from this, I can't remember the name of it, you probably know, that satellite that we sent out into space about maybe 15 years ago, that in case they meet extraterrestrial life, they should be able to understand what we're talking about. You remember that? We are friendly people here on Earth. I hope you are too. NASA sent it out. Anyway, it was all done in binaries. So we got kind of like the inspiration from these binaries, and that's what you see in these little discs, triangles and circles, squares, triangles, circles, and squares over here, and half squares and rectangles and things like that, working on the piece right there. And the orbiting of the galaxies and all, which we've seen in other places too. And that's it. So, I'll take any questions, if you have any questions or discussion points. Yes, please. Yeah. Well, I don't have my Bible, but I'll get the words out. Let me kind of, okay. Nor rulers, nor nothing present, things to come. Nothing will keep us from the love of Christ, in all creation. Okay. Yeah, it's that famous passage there in Romans 8. It's Romans 8 anyway.
Maybe just one or two more questions, and if you have more, you can stay afterwards and talk about Patella. One or two more questions?
Yes, sir.
It's interesting to hear you talk about, you gave a lot of information to the artist about what's going on in the passage. What happened, how did you reread the text when you started looking at the images?
Yeah, yes. Okay, the question you're asking is, what is the relationship between the text and the image? We were reading the text and saying, this is what the text is saying, and then getting the image back. A lot of times it was pretty powerful, I have to admit. Things that came back, it's kind of like the penny that dropped was this. In fact, we started using the term translation. What we did was send something over in Word, and it was translated to image. So it was almost like if you're translating something from English to French or to German or something like that. That was kind of like the metaphor we were using. But it was, you get it back in an image form, and my expression was, is that what we meant? And you have to sit, and we had to sit with it for a while, because we had the final approval of whether the image went in there. And so we said, you didn't want to jump on something and make a premature decision saying, well, this is, it was all abstract, so this isn't what we meant. Well, what is the it, if it's abstract? When we wanted it abstract. So there had to be a little bit of digestion that had to go on there, a little bit of rumination. But it was generally very, very positive. Sometimes it was like when the Psalms came back, Irene Knoll, who was the premier architect of the Psalm page. I'll tell you the Psalms, okay? Anyway, when she got it, she started crying. I remember that. But part of it was this, with the Psalms. Here's what started, here's this, if you're looking for, necessity is the mother of invention, this began the CIT, okay? When we got an email, those of us who were we were kind of working along the edges there, they wanted advice on this, that, and the other thing. And finally, they said, we got the funding to start the Bible. What pictures do you want to have? And I remember reading that, and I was overcome with horror and fear. So what's this going to be? Everyone's favorite picture in the Bible? This is, and suppose they don't, it's got to be, this is going to be our one-shot deal. We can't sit there and just have a collection of everyone's favorite Bible story. You know what I mean? So that started it. And once we started that, saying we wanted this to develop thematically and theologically, what is the important part of our whole tradition that we want to bring forth. Once we started that, then the images started coming back. That's what it was kind of like the plate that we were measuring, the template that we were measuring them against, and see how that worked. And they did. And so and a lot of times you find too that the images grow on you. That the things that you kind of gave first pass to and say, yeah, that's good enough, or that's good, really said, no, it's more than good enough. That's really, really good. That's really, things like that. Yep.
All right, well, we'll stop there. If you have any additional questions, I encourage you to stick around afterwards and talk to Father Patella. Father Patella, thank you.
Thank you very much.